All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to have you all here. It's good to have some faces coming back to us today. We're very happy. It's so good to have you all here for first lunch and learn of Sunday. As we were talking just before, we should be learn and lunch instead of a lunch and learn, because first comes the learning, first comes our lecture. And today we're going to have a lecture about the history importance of the codification by our friend Marco. And but always before we start our lecture, we're going to have our initial reading and our initial prayer by our friend Maria Lucia. Good morning.
Good morning.
Today we are going to have the reading from the book Happy Life by Joana de Angelis with Divaldo Pereira Franco. When you make higher resolutions and save yourself room for the madness of imbalance, you will be visited by people who will try to convince you that you are wrong. Pursue your health goals and do not listen to them. When you fall, few will be that hands that will help you get up. And there is no shortage of those who will push the fallen person into the pit of despair. Unfortunately, those people who are ready to give disinterested help are still few, while the numbers of those who take pleasure in make others miserable increases. Move ahead, doing good, and goodness will do you good. So let's close our eyes. Let's connect it to Jesus, our Master, and the good spirits who are here with us to help us to understand today's lesson, to open up our hearts and mind so we can refresh our commitments, our goals, and strengthen our faith. Let's thank again all of them for this opportunity and ask God, Jesus, and Mary to bless us all. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So very happy to be here again for the Lunch and Learn. Again, we've been 3 years now. We're talking about that, right? Oh, Angela's here too. Hello. Just like so, we've been many years without having any events here at the center. Obviously, many years now that we're starting, right? We're in the process of starting again. So this is very important, right? Because this is what brings us together. This is what makes us, at least for this particular hour in our week, allows us to reconnect, as we read in the message here by Joanna. There's a lot of good things a lot of positive things about being here. So thank you all for making your ways up to here today. And today we're going to talk about so the theme of this Lunch and Learn is about the history, or significance, or importance of Spiritism. And I kept the original title that was there when we discussed the titles for the whole year, which is the codification, which is part, like, encompasses the work of Kardec at that time. And I think it's really important for us to revisit that in a sense that what is Spiritism? Why is it different, right? So what is about Spiritism that makes us rationalize things and change the way our relationship with faith altogether, right? So we're going to talk about some key elements today. This is, I would say, like a summary of some key elements of Spiritism. Also, obviously, not all of it, and they're listed basically in the introductions of the five books that make the codification from Kardec. And we'll see that. So what are those key elements we're going to talk about today? First of all, Spiritism in itself, you can define it as a religion, which is this moral compass, right? This connection to above, right? That is the key element of what we are. Science, in the sense that we're studying off works from an individual, Kardec, and a group of spirits that helped him at the time, that were able to organize and sort through information, categorize things, and write about it, and in a way that we can read it now 150 years later and still get a lot of information from it. But not only that, all that material work that was done is a reflection of thousands of years of evolution from the moral principles, the law of love, which obviously is the key essence of Jesus to us, right? And philosophy, in a way, so philosophy is the study of the method of the science, right? So we're studying again how to prove, how to analyze things in a way that we can derive theories from it, and not only theories but prove or disprove certain points. So it is a philosophy in that sense too, and we're going to talk about that. So what that all does is allows us to have this very interesting concept of rationalized faith, right? So it's a type of faith that Spiritism really embodies, which is the idea that if we believe, we should better believe this against any other idea and any question that we have, right? So basically, our faith will sustain any questioning from any time, from any person, and any theory, right? Just because, not because we believe, because, yeah, we believe because someone told me to believe in this, but I believe because I choose to believe, and I choose to believe based on this information, which is very different from previous concepts in humanity, right? It also talks about spiritist communication, which is basically communication between spirits, which is obviously not new. We know that for many thousands of years in many religions, right? That talk about how do we communicate with discarnate beings, and well, you can put names in the past. You can say it's angels or demons or all the sorts of things. But reality now, we know that this is just us, right? Without a body. So Spiritism brings that concept and explains it. The idea of reincarnation, which is, again, a key element of the justice of God, right? How can we understand what happens to us now, right? And how can we make this better? So that's the key element of reincarnation. And the most important one, where the consolation comes from, right? Which is the fact and the absolute truth that all of us will be perfect one day. No doubt about it. Now, when, how long, roads we're going to take, yeah, that, we're all in it, right? It's very hard to answer questions. We're in right in the middle of that process. But Spiritism gives us like a little glimpse. So it's almost like you drive in this highway, and imagine I have no map, no GPS now, right? So you don't have your Google Maps, Android in your car. You're connected. Watch is not connected anymore, right? Your cell phone's dead. You don't have a paper map anymore, but you roughly know the direction you're going. Let's say you want to go west. You kind of know somehow that you're going west, right? So what Spiritism brings to us is this incredible perspective that when you're in that car and you have no clue where you're going, it's very hard for you to find a way to figure out where you're going. I mean, you can look at some sort of elements around you. You can look at the sun and say, well, if the sun is setting that way, so I'm kind of roughly know that I'm going this particular direction, right? But you don't know what's up ahead. Like it's kind of this almost like a darkness of information coming to you, right? So what's next city? Where I'm going to refuel my gas? I have no idea, right? Is my car going to last this trip? Is there any dangers ahead of the road? So what Spiritism brings this incredible window that you can actually look ahead of you and say, whoa, wait a minute. Oh, Spiritism is like my GPS almost, right? So I know where I'm going, right? Gives me a perfect path to get there. The best path. You can even choose if you want to save gas or if you want to take a long time, right? If you want to go slow, that's your choice, right? The GPS doesn't, they're annoying. Keep telling you like turn left, and you don't, right? And then it's like, you missed your turn left again. You missed your turn again, right? See, that's exactly what the spirituality is doing to us. Like you're driving on this road, right? And the spirits and your mentors and spiritism and the books in spiritism will tell you, like, you got to go that way, because if you choose this way, this is going to be a very rough road. You're going to go through the mountains and cliffs and these odd intertwining roads that is dangerous, right? So we keep choosing our path on that road. So spiritists bring us this massive 20-inch like touchscreen screen that tells us, oh, wait a minute, so do this, see, and you'll be fine, right? And I'll give an estimate of kind of, this is what happens down the road. You're going to get there, it'll be fine, right? Every turn you miss, right, you're going to have this new message saying, well, yeah, that's okay. You missed your turn, you missed your chances. Go back to it. You have a chance to go back at it, and you still can finish your road, and you can do it a million times till you get there, right? That certainty, that understanding of where you're going, how you're going, and why you're going, this is what Spiritism brings to us in life. Now, this is a difficult concept to grasp if you don't understand like basic concepts of what is God and what's Jesus' role is in our life and all those little things. But that we kind of know somehow already, not because we're special, but because the civilization has evolved from a point where God was like son to a point where we know that, God is some sort of a superpower thing that tells us, created everything and tells us what to do. So we already at that stage that we kind of grasp that idea. So that's how it's so important that Spiritism now can give us the touchscreen GPS, right? Because we're not faced by technology anymore. We can get it, right? Because if I take that same massive GPS that Spiritism brings to us and I give to someone in the 50s, right, driving their pickup truck out of nowhere, they'll probably throw that in the garbage and say, I don't know what this is, right? They have no clue how to turn it on. Touchscreen, never seen this before. This is useless to me, right? So see, all of that is intentional. It's planned, it's organized. Nothing's by chance, right? So why all of this started in the 1850s? Well, remember, we were going through an incredible industrial revolution, right? Cultural revolutions popping up everywhere. Like we're talking about post American Revolution, and then Industrial Revolution in Europe, and we have the all these new concepts of democracy popping up everywhere, and the relationship between classes in society. Everything is kind of turning upside down, right? So Spiritism comes right at that area where new concepts and new ideas are bubbling in entire Europe, right? So it brings in all this incredible information, and only now we're really starting to solidify this, right? In a way that we can talk about Spiritism in a more open and free way, right? So in other words, now we can use the GPS. It's available to us, right? So that's what Spiritism brings. So we're going to talk about that too. Okay. All right. So let's talk about now. Obviously, the whole thing's going to be about Lankerdak today, right? And needless to say that me as a scientist by training and by profession, that's actually what I do for work. That's one of the key elements, and we were just discussing that with Paul a minute ago. That to me, this is one of the key elements of why am I so passionate about this, and why I've changed my entire life after I read the 5 books of codification, or the essential books of Spiritism, right? So Allan Kardec writes, this is an introduction to Spiritism book, in the Spirit's book, and I'll say again, if you read all these books and you don't pay attention to introductions, you're going to be missing like 30% of the information that you need from that book. Because the whole discussion that he does in the introduction about what are the critics, what are the problems, what are the questions, why are we doing this? Like, this is essential for you to grasp the idea of what Spiritism is. The question and answer, yeah, that's straightforward. We can read through this like quick, but you're not going to get it I can guarantee you, you're going to have to read it several times to get some of the most important concepts. So this is straight from introduction. It says, for new ideas, new words are needed. Well, it's an interesting concept, right? In order to secure clearness of language by avoiding the confusion inseparable from the employment of the same term or expressed in different meanings. So what is he talking about? Spiritism as a word did not exist. It didn't. And then he talks about this, like, am I going to talk to a spiritualist, which is a word that existed before, and it still exists, right? But he was arguing that, well, wait a minute, but spiritualism is just this idea or concept that you believe in something that is not physical, like it's a spiritual existence. But spiritism is not that, right? Spiritualism, like anyone that believes in anything that is not material, is by definition a spiritualist. In other words, you believe in something that is beyond your senses of capability of the physical matter, right? So he needed to coin a new term just to talk about what he's doing, right? So we say then that the fundamental principle of the Spiritism, is the relation of the material world with spirits, or the beings of the invisible world, and we designate the adherents to the Spiritist theory as Spiritists. So he not only coined the word Spiritism, but he also coined the word Spiritist, which is the one that studies Spiritism. That's us, basically, right? By that single little movement in history, he actually created this entire new concept of understanding the world, right? Because if he blended his ideas with what we knew then about spiritualistic concepts, we would, as Spiritists, not survived. We would have been blended in other religions that believed in spirits. We would have been, and this happened, right? There are many religions today that have blended fusion versions of knowledge of spiritism and other knowledges, which is fair and fine. It happens all the time. Some African descended religions, some Asian descended religions that believe in many concepts that we believe too. That's great. Like, the world moves together like that. But we as spiritists would not have survived as a new concept of religion if he did not write this, which is the first 5 pages of the introduction to Spiritist book. Right? And we miss it. It's just interesting. Like, we as spiritists don't really think too much about it, right? But this is absolutely fundamental for who we are, right? Okay. So he also uses this, this is question 799. He talks about what's the goal of spiritism. Now, we're going to talk about the scientific components of his work in a minute, but as in any philosophical or methods, when you're doing the methods of your study, you set up as aims, right, or goals, right? You hypothesize, and then you aim to test that hypothesis in different ways. So he set up front saying, our aim is to help humankind improve their moral and intellectual progression, right? But listen, he's very careful. See the words the spirits are choosing, right? And he's interpreting is that the aim is to help humankind improve their moral intellectual progression. Is not to say that we are the sole guide or sole element of perfection in the universe. Far away from that, right? He's being clear to us to say, here it is. This is the information you're going to need and you're going to find very helpful, right? This can help you, right? This is my goal. I don't want anything more than that, because now it's up to us. Literally, this is what it is. This is going to help your more intellectual progression, right? But you need to do the work, right? It's not like, come to me because I am all the knowledge in the universe. Never said that. Far away from it, right? And he even goes to a point of saying, if you find any single bit of information that you can prove that goes against what I write, go for that. Don't listen to me. He writes that down. Now, this is exactly how we in science work our minds, right? Because if I write a paper and I test it in 10 different ways, one hypothesis, and I say, well, this is what it is, this is the pathway I found, and I publish it. Like, if you repeat my experiment and found that one of the proteins I tested actually was wrong or missing or did it differently, I'd be sure that I would say, okay, fine, I'll test you now and I'll go. If you're right, I'll jump right on your wagon because I know I'm wrong. No problem doing that, right? This is how science evolves. So this is, again, coming from someone who obviously knew what he was talking about, right? So a little bit of historical context here, right? Before we go into more of the scientific things about this. So he was born in Lyon, right, 1804, and as we know, he's typical at that time, traditional Catholic family, right? Now things start to change here. So if you read a little bit of biography and history of Kardec and Spiritism, you start to realize that very, very early on in his life, he would have this very interesting insights about things that most of us don't care about, right? For example, as a young boy, and it's well described this story, is that he already talking and meditating about ways of uniting different Christian groups at the time, because obviously going to the Catholic Church and being exposed to different types of Christian traditions, let's put it this way, he already knew that he would have to find ways of bringing a common ground, right, to all of that. Now, who as a boy here is thinking about that? I think very few people, right? Because I was not thinking about that till very, very late in my this existence when I started reading Kardec, and then I started thinking about, like, yeah, that makes sense. But certainly not when I was young. But at age 10, he already moved to Switzerland to study with Pestalozzi. Now, none of this is by chance, right? So the incarnatory plan for Kardec, now you can kind of imagine how complicated that was, right? Because you're going to bring this individual, which does not possess a very well-developed mediumship, and not by chance. It's because they didn't want the personalism to be involved in the codification. Right? So he will rely on information that's brought to him from thousands of other mediums all over the world, right? But he has to come and learn, maybe not from the traditional schools of the time, but from someone, Pestalozzi, that one of the key elements of Pestalozzi at that time was to recognize that people are different and you have to adapt methods to deliver information to people specifically. How shocking that is. We know that now, right? But this is not known at the time. The idea that you have to experiment, to experience things to learn. We know, we take it for granted to say, yeah, you want to learn how trees grow. You put a little seed of bean into a little plastic cup, put water on it. Like, we all do this, right? With kids all the time, right? This is new from that time. Now we know that if we experiment with things and we feel it and we grasp it, we go outside and see how the grass grow, that's how we learn, right? That's Pestalozzi work. See? So Hippolyte at the time, like Professor Rivoyu, started to learn with Pestalozzi, right? That particular way. So in 23, right? So let's talk about he's like 18 years old, like 18 years of age. He writes a book about practical and theoretical course on math based on Pestalozzi methods. This is an 18-year-old boy writing about the methods book in math. Right? Starts there, I can tell you this. I could barely know how to add or subtract by that time, but So in 1828, he opens his own institute that is primarily serving people who are in need and teaching them. But see, at that time, for the youngers here, so at that time, teaching was not like today. It's like, you have a math teacher, science teacher, this teacher, and, all sorts of things, right? So at that time, you would teach basically everything. Like you were the teacher, right? So basically, every information comes from you in that sense, right? So he opened this institute, which basically he taught every single subject, right, in the highest level, and obviously because he with obviously his incredible developed moral concepts, right? He was doing that to help hundreds and hundreds of people that would come to him, right, for free to learn, right? Obviously, with not only himself, but definitely his wife too was helping quite a lot, and so many others at the time, right? So he's married at 1832, and then now 1950. Right, yeah, that was 1950. Yeah, sorry, like 1850, right? In 1850, he's already part of many different scientific societies in Europe. He wrote many books. He writes all sorts of things. He's teaching. He's serving people, and then he's introduced to the idea of the turning tables, those seances, right? In Paris at that time, very popular, where a number of well-known people at the time in the society started to pay attention to these things, right? When things move and this incredible things would happen in very unique and strange places, not in university, right? Not into well-organized spaces, usually get together in a salon or in someone's house, right? And bring a bunch of people around the table, and all of a sudden chair starts to move. Like, as a scientist, I would say I would not go to those places. I would be far away from it, because to me, there's nothing real about that, right? It's like seriously, I'm gonna go see people pretending to move tables? Yeah, not interested, right? But he was, right? And I'm just trying to tell you like how much I don't understand Kardec yet, and I'm working on that every day. But he went there, but not to have fun with that. Like, he had a goal. He said, if this is happening, this is real. I'm going to dedicate my entire baggage and knowledge about this to make sure that I disprove this. So actually, his original intention was most likely to show that that was not true, right? Which is exactly what a scientist would do, right? You go with your hypothesis, in this case, a negative hypothesis, say, this is not working, right? And voila, we have Spiritism today, right? So that's kind of how it all started. Just a quick refresh here, that unshakable faith is that which stand face to face with reason in all epochs of humanity. This is by Kardec. So this is the absolute truth, right? Do you want to gauge your faith? Think about, how can we face reason at any time with your face and still be fine with it, right? And stand up the day and say, yep, my faith is really there, right? So here are the sequence of books, right, from 1857 to 68. Obviously, the Spirits book is the first one. Then followed right after by the Mediums book, which is now explaining the mediumistic communication phenomena. And then the Gospel, which is, to me, is the heart of everything we do, right, which connects everything we learn from Spirit and Spiritism back into the Gospel of Jesus and tie them all back together. Heaven and Hell, which is an incredibly interesting book that talks about the concepts of heaven and hell, but not only that, gives a lot of experiences and communications from spirits, right, to talk about the spiritual world, right, and the Genesis, which is a more technical book about the development of our planet and our universe and Spiritism, right? So. Okay, so now let's go to the idea of religion, science, and philosophy, right? So this is from introduction. See, again, I'm just talking about introduction of books today. So Introduction of Spiritist Philosophy by Allan Kardec. So Spiritism is simultaneously a philosophy in the field of scientific study. So as a scientific endeavor, it studies the relationship between the physical and the spiritual worlds, right? As a philosophy, it deals with the moral implications of such relationships, right? More explicitly, I advance that Spiritism is a science that deals with the nature, the origin, and the destiny of spirits and their relationship with the corporeal world. So there you go. If you want to summarize what Spiritism is to someone in one line, this is the one line you would quote, right? What is Spiritism? So it's a science that deals with the nature, like who we are, right? The origin, like who created us, how we're created, why are we created, right? And where are we going, right? And the destinies, in other words, where are we going, right? Of the spirits. But not only that, that's a part of it, but also the relationship between the spiritual world and the physical world, right? So that basically is the entire concept of what Spiritism is. right? So religion. So is it a religion? So that's reconnect, right? So only faith that is based on truth guarantees the future because it has nothing to fear. This is important. So your faith has nothing to fear from the progress of enlightenment, seeing that what is true in obscurity is also true in light. There you go. In other words, if something is true, this is how profound that is, right? I could be anywhere and any time with the lights out, dark, not knowing anything. Like you remember the driving the car in the beginning, right? You're driving the car, no map, no GPS, have no idea where you're going. But there are some beliefs in there that when I get my GPS back, turn on the lights, and know exactly where to go, there's still the same truth. It did not change a single thing. So that's how real faith is. True faith, right? Is not only believing, but believing and knowing that no matter what happens, that will still be true. Want to know one thing? The love. And he talks about this. In the introduction, again, introduction of his books, he will write this, both introduction of gospel and introduction of the Spirit's book. He will write this. It's like in the gospel, particularly introduction, he'll talk about this. He'll say, you can disagree with me on anything, like the physical nature of things. You can disagree with me on the type of energy that surrounds us. You can disagree in any of the scientific concepts that I brought into this entire work that I did. But if you want to find a common ground with any person that no one will ever be able to disagree with you, here to think the moral concepts of Spiritism, which are all based on the moral concepts of the law of love. There are the concepts of what Jesus brought, which is really the tying force of the universe. So in other words, there are a few things in your faith that we know as a fact, no one can disagree with you. Like no one can disagree that we all need to love each other, right? As a brother or sister, right? To evolve. That is undeniable. And that will be true today, and that will be true at any single time in history of the universe. That's what he's trying to explain to us, right? So what is true in obscurity is also true in light, right? Each religion claims to have possession of exclusive truth. But for someone, so this is a concept, right? But for someone to proclaim blind faith on a point of belief is to confess themselves impotent to demonstrate that they're right. So this criticism is targeting, obviously, the mainstream religions at the time that would tell you to believe in what they themselves cannot tell you why or how or even if it's possible. But they'll tell you like, yeah. So if I tell you just believe in this and repeat this a million times, right? Till you believe in it, but does not give you the background, the understanding of why you're doing that. That is exactly the type of obscure faith that you're going to be impotent to support. So anyone can come to you and give you another idea and tell you to repeat it a million times, and you just go for it, right? Because there's no context, right? There's no background to it, information. Right? And this is from the gospel, according to Spiritism. So philosophy. Okay. So what is the philosophy part of it, right? So, so if you think about philosophy being, again, the study of the method, right? Or the study of the how, so the study how to ask a question, right? And get an answer that you can reanalyze in a methodical way and get answers from it that will sustain in a theory, in a thesis, right? That's what philosophy really is learning the method, basically, right? So much so that, when you, the highest degree you can earn in university is called the Doctor of Philosophy, basically, right? You're not the Doctor of Dentistry, which you also have, but that is completely different, right? That's just a technical degree to show that you have skills to do certain things, right? The Doctor of Philosophy skill is totally different, is to prove to you that with this degree, you are able to ask a question and answer it. I know, it sounds boring, right? But that's really what it is. So I'll give you the method and the ways, the means to do it, and to organize it in such a way that you can ask any question and you get an answer that's irrefutable down the road, right? So this is exactly what Spiritism brings to us. The idea that, yes, you can ask questions, and I'll give you elements to derive theories or hypotheses about this, and ways of testing it, and ways to find your answer, right? So it's called, I added this here. So it's the rational investigation of the truth, the principles of the being, the knowledge, and the conduct, right? That's what Spiritism brings as a philosophy. And the one that I like the most, obviously, and I'll tell you a little, add a little bracket here about my own experience. This today is not about me, but obviously, I think if I add this, will be very helpful in understanding where we are and what we're doing today. Is that science, again, as a systematic approach to questions, and we just talked about. So, when I would say that my entire existence, I've always been really, I find it very difficult to believe, right? I always had that sense that, as a kid, and you can imagine how annoying of a kid I was, because I would not take a particular thing you tell me, and I'll completely believe in you, right? Until you give me some sort of a rationale of like, why is this happening, right? My mom will tell you that I would actually open up a new toy and take it apart just to test why there was a sound coming from it, right? And I would take it all apart till I found exact piece inside that thing that was making a sound that I could not understand why, right? I've lost a lot of toys, you can imagine, like doing that. So I was this very annoying kid. And yeah, my mom would tell you a lot of stories that I don't think it's the time and place to do it here, but they're very interesting. So it would be the same in religion. So I was brought up obviously in Catholic Church, and like many of us, and I'm so grateful for that, right? I'm not here to say anything bad about it, like some people do, right? Why? Because that's how I met Jesus, right there. It wasn't Spiritism, right? It was my upbringing. So the Catholic Church gave me the ability of saying, this is God, this is Jesus, this is what he said, this is what happened. And I soaked all that information from there. So for that, I'm eternally grateful for every single person that I met inside the Catholic Church that allowed me to be here today and be who I am, right? But obviously, it wasn't that sailing, right? Because at some point, you would have some concepts, and I'll say, and one, for example, that stuck to me so many times is like, why the guy that got more talent, and the guy that had little talent totally has no talent now, and he's punished to death or something, or go somewhere. I'm like, that makes no sense to me, right? Because you think about equality, right? You think about, but then no one could really explain that to me in a sensical way, right? It's like, it still doesn't make sense. Why this concept? So why certain concepts were very difficult for me to grasp, and I'll be like, I can't really believe in this, right? So you go there and you do some rituals, and the rituals will say, you take this, and this is like this is like what represent. It's like, no, but this is real. This is blood, and this is the body. It's like, no, this is not, right? Scientifically, I cannot agree with that, right? So little things that would happen, and I'll be in trouble, right? Because I'll be the one to say, I don't think that's real, right? So that got me a lot of trouble, but I still, I learned that way. And even in my, my academic career, let's put it this way, I always had that sense of, okay, just like prove me wrong kind of thing, right? Which is not a very good attitude, but anyways, it's just to kind of show my inclination for science very early on. So when I started studying Spiritism, which was in 2009. Yes, 2009. That was actually the first time that I studied Spiritism, although I've been in contact with Spiritism since probably age 10. But that was the first time that I picked up a book, right? And I said, okay, I'm going to read about this, right? By that time, I was already a postdoctoral fellow, right? So I picked up the book, and right here, I picked up the book from Kardec. You know, not necessarily to say I'm going to pick this because this is going to change my life. No, my concept was very similar to Kardec at the time. I'm going to pick this, and either I'll show that this makes no sense, right? Because that was my scientific mind talking about. Or if this convinced me, then I'm sure that this is where I should go, right? So I picked up the book to actually prove it wrong, right? That's me. That's how my mind works, right? And obviously, I'm here today. So that kind of tells you where we started here, and we took this massive turn, which is completely non-anticipated from my scientific way of seeing the world. And obviously, I have to say that obviously that's not easy, because there's a lot of understanding of how messed up you've done things in the past, and you know how concepts that you took for granted are completely wrong. And there's all this like know yourself that we talk about. It's like, yeah, know yourself. Oh, it's so beautiful. No, it's tough, right? When you actually know who you are, oh my God, when you really know who you are, you're gonna cry a little bit, right? Or maybe a lot, or you're gonna be depressed. I don't know. But this is not easy. Like, and for anyone that says like, yeah, I know, I studied this, I know myself. I don't know. I'm not. Maybe I should not talk about it. But I would say when you come to realize who you really are, right, and you learn about Spiritism and you start to ask the questions, right? Now we really know what Kardec did at that time, right? Jeez, right? He took on this entirety of knowledge, right? And me as this, question everything type of person, also I took all those questions, I soaked those books as fast as I could, and I kept reading and reading and reading until now, obviously, at some point I started to realize that one, I knew nothing about anything, right? I thought I knew, but I didn't. And the second thing is that it was a humbling experience to realize that, well, now I think my faith is different, right? And that's how I feel today, right? So a little background of, this is how we do science, right? We do some background reading, right? We hypothesize something, right? That we can test whether it's wrong or right? We experiment, so we do the methods approach, and then we decide whether the hypothesis is true or false, and then we report the result. This is exactly how Kardec took Spiritism, right? This is exactly what we do at university, right? So how do we do that? There you go. So if you think at the top and say, as a science, Spiritism is a light religion, right? Because as a philosophy, it has obviously religious consequences, right? As a religion, right, without contradicting the laws of nature, it does not stand in the way of progress or and will be invulnerable to that, right? So in the review spirit, right, that's we're going to have this passage, which is very interesting, right? So let those inclined towards the science to cultivate them in their dignity, right? Those who devote themselves to philosophy to ennoble its postulates, and those who consecrate themselves to religion to turn divine its aspirations. Right? Yet, above all, it is necessary that the basis of Spiritism remain in everyone and everything, so that we do not lose the balance, the base over which the organization is raised. In other words, he's giving us the hint that if we don't take those three things together, you may get in trouble, right? If you only see the science of things, or if you only see the religious thing, or if you're only stuck to philosophy and you don't see them all connected, that's really not true Spiritism, right? So this is from a study, Dr. Moreira Almeida in Brazil. He published so many articles about Spiritism. He's a very, very well-known person in Brazil. So he writes this article in 2008 called The Conceptual Framework to Explain Mediumistic Phenomena, right? Qualitative Methods, right? So here's what he did. So that's just the background, right? So mediums producing accurate information previously unknown or in opposition to their previous opinion and that of any sitter. In other words, he's looking at mediums that can come with information that the medium doesn't know, like no one doesn't know, right? And it usually comes against what actually the medium believes. So you're proving for sure that information is not coming from the medium, right? So mediums exhibiting previously unlearned skills, for example, mediums that are illiterate mediums, right? For example, mediums that can't write, and all of a sudden, during the mediumistic trance, they actually can write in many languages, right? He's analyzing multiple different ways, right, to test that as true, right? So writing in a way, or calligraphy, similar to the communicating spirits, right? So he brings the ideas of Kardec there, right there. So he brings all the references to Kardec, right? For example, painting or drawing by mediums who do not have any training in painting or drawing. We have that, right, in Kardec there. Poetry, right? Xenoglossy or xenography, in other words, talking in a different language or writing in a different language, right? So after analyzing all of that, he mentioned that mediumistic communication show a wide range of personal psychological characteristics, right? Such as humor, conscience, words, likes, dislikes, and related to alleged personality. So he looks at all of this criteria, right, to create what was the conceptual framework that Kardec used at the time, right? So when Kardec was actually reviewing over 1,000 different communications, right? Sometimes he would review hundreds of questions, the same question from 100 different places, right? He'll get all that information in his desk. He'll read all of them, and he'll match them. For example, the one that is true from this side and another person out of nowhere that don't know each other, and they write to me the same answer to that question, for sure, that has to be coming from somewhere else, right? Particularly if it follows this conceptual framework. In other words, mediums that even more mediums that couldn't know how to write, and they didn't talk in different languages, write in different languages, write things that they don't believe in. So all this little information that we take for granted today. So we're reading Kardec, again, 59, 58, 61. You see, those are the books from Kardec cited there. And we take for granted that, oh yeah, Kardec wrote this book. That's super cool, right? No, he worked like every single day from the time he wakes up to the time he go to bed, just to make sure that everything that made its way into these books is for sure the most accurate information. And he left out, and he writes about this, tons of stuff that he could not find matching information or proof. In other words, when you're reading Kardec, you're reading years of work, of scientific methodological approach to finding out if information is correct or not, right? So this is really what Spiritism, as what we call as the codification, like of Spiritism. This is what is it about, right? So we should always think about that, right? We usually don't grasp that. For example, like here in the Gospel according to Spiritism, there's over 1,000 Spiritist centers that contributed to it, right? So he created a series of questions, coordinated, classified, revised, multiple answers, right? To make the Spirit's book, for example, right? And he developed and applied all these methods, right? Systematically to every single one of those communicating letters, right? And this is a picture of the Druids, right? Because he ended up changing his name opposite to Kardec, which is like a Druid name from a previous incarnation that he had, right? Because again, he wanted to separate he as a scientist, professor, from the work he was creating, right? So, again, going back to the principles of Spiritism, right? To summarize, so principle of God, right? We can't really define well, but we know there's some attributes that we can say, like which is perfectly just, good, right? All powerful, unique, right? So we know all of that. The idea of life after death. In other words, I don't actually like the idea of life after death. I think it's just a life as incarnated or discarnated spirit, right? Because really death doesn't really exist. The idea of reincarnation, again, just to make sure that we will have chances, we'll grow, and we'll be perfect one day. The idea of multitude of inhabited worlds, which is completely crazy at that time. Like, how can we have life in different planets? And we're still searching, right? We're still searching. A little green goblin, like living somewhere in Mars. I don't know. We're so creative, right? So see how funny humanity didn't change. Like, when we go back to the Egyptians, which actually spirits that were far more advanced than us at that time, coming from Capella and developing some of the scientific stuff they did in Egypt at that time. So even then, at that time, would look at some sort of animal fusion with individuals to be representative gods, right? So it'd be like a cat, human, dog, or a cat, human figure, right? To be representative of God. Or they would look at the sun and say, well, the sun is right there. I can't create the sun. So by definition, the sun has to be some sort of a deity or God, right? So we used to do that in the past. Now what we do, we just transplanted it to other things, right? For example, finding extraterrestrial life, we tend to represent it as some sort of a humanoid green figure with a big head and big eyes, which is completely nonsensical, right? But we totally go for it, right? So just to show that we're still the same, we're just incarnated again with the same concept. It's like, no, now I'm not talking about God. I'm going to talk about this weird stuff, right? That I can't explain, but I'll put a figure on it, right? Or the drawings of God, right? People drawing God as this old Caucasian, bearded, kind of white hair individual, which again makes absolutely no sense, right? But we absolutely go for it. Even Jesus, like the representation of Jesus, 90% of them is a Caucasian, light-haired, light-eyed individual with white skin, which makes absolutely no sense because that did not exist at that time in that location, right? So we're talking about like almost like the opposite of like what really Jesus looked like when he incarnated, and the concepts of the communicability of spirits, right? So again, Spiritism, the concepts of Spiritism are spread all over the world in different religions and different traditions, right? We share many of those with many people, right? They're brought from many different mediums all over the world, right? They do not depend on only one person, right? Because that would be a problem, right? That would be the ideas like, oh yeah, I followed back. Oh, we do that, Spiritism, by the way. We still do that. It's inside our, it's still inside of our hearts, right? It's like, oh, you Spiritist, yeah, I followed this guy, right? Everywhere he goes, oh my God, he's so amazing, right? Which is fine. Like people are good about it. They're good speakers, right? We have a lot of good speakers out there. But the concept that you blindly follow one person in Spiritism is so against what Spiritism is that it boggles me. It's like, okay, right? But that's, the information is not there. The information is, anyways, this is a different story. But there's no nationality, right? Obviously. It does not stem from any known religion, right? There's no social class. There's no hierarchy. In other words, I'm not Marco, the Spiritist speaker. No, I'm just Marco, the guy that works at the center, right? And every time you see someone adding to their name that this is an international renowned speaker, that's trouble there, right? Because we don't have that class of individuals in Spiritism, right? Oh, this is this guy, XY, Joe Doe, Spiritist writer and speaker. I don't understand what that is, right? Because really that does not exist in Spiritism, right? To me, I would say Joe Doe, the Spiritist, which means that I go to the center, I clean the floor, I help bring up things, I teach the kids, whatever I can do to help, I help. This is a Spiritist, right? Anyways, sorry for the ranting. Okay. They're transmitted gradually by the enlightened spirits, of course, right? Gradually, because we can't really take a lot of the concepts, right? Just to finalize now, so Pestalozzi writes this, which now you're going to understand more about Kardec, right? Because Pestalozzi is going to write this. So only by actually thinking, the power of thought is developed. How about that, right? So you don't think, you don't exist. Remember? That was philosophically known at the time before, right? So how do you know you exist? Because you think, right? How do you know? This is philosophy. So how do you know that you're completely free? Some philosophers got really crazy and mad to the fact that they can't control their thoughts. Isn't that absolutely crazy? But think about this. This is one of the only very few things you can do in your life that you can do at any time, and you really have zero control about it. You can try, right? But your thoughts are really a window into who you are. Now that's scary, right? Because some of our thoughts are not that fun, right? But just to show you how much we don't know ourselves yet, right? So what he's saying is that, well, if you're thinking and if you really keep thinking, eventually you will build that thinking into knowledge, or the power of thinking, right? The power of thought, right? Only by actually imagining that the powers of imagination get developed, right? So the same applies to the powers of art. Only by using it, those one become skilled. That's true. Like even the ones that are super gifted spirits that come with already this incredible amount of baggage of learning how to play the piano. If they don't play the piano, that's useless, right? You have to do it, right? And finally, so only by strenuous effort does the body get stronger. That I know too, for sure, right? That if you don't, there's in the hospital here, that's someone's job here in the front, as a physiotherapist, like in the hospital. If you don't move, it doesn't, atrophies. It stops. Like you lose muscle power, right? And finally, the same applies to the moral powers. Bingo, like big star for us right now, right? What does that mean? It means that the love only develops by the act of loving. Oh, I need to do this. Well, are you doing it? Like, I talk about love all the time, but do you love? Right? Talking about it is great. There's a lot of good speakers that talk about beautiful things and do nothing about what they talk about, right? So we do the same, right? So the only develops by the act of loving and not by talking about love, right? Religious faith only develops by believing, not by talking about faith, right? Nor by the knowledge or learning by heart of things believed by others, right? So now if you take that from Pestalozzi now and think about Kardec, see, now we know why that incarnation was so well planned out ahead of time, right? So Kardec could come and use the powers that he had, the talents that he brought. And he's the guy that brought 10 talents in his bag and returned 5,000, right? Because he was enabled by all this network spirits that allowed it to be there. All the way from Mesmer, that was talking about animal forces, electricity or power, magnetism, right? So Mesmer brings the idea of magnetism. Pestalozzi brings the idea of that you got to love, otherwise you're not going to learn what love is, right? So all those things are happening at the same time. So Kardec come and deliver to us this, right? That's what Spiritism is. Okay? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Marco. That was a great lecture. I think it's a very good lecture for introduction. People don't know what Spiritism is or want to understand the basis or how it was written out. A lot of people, even inside Spiritism, think that Kardec was a medium. And that he got all the books through mediumship, right? And it's funny sometimes when I tell people, no, he was not. Of course, he had a high sensibility in there, but when people tell people sometimes, no, he was not. It's like, no, but how he wrote the books, right? They're not aware of this systematic, scientific way of doing the books, right? That's why it's so rational, and I think that's why these days it's easier to read and make sense. Because I was a troubled kid. Like you, not with my toys, but in the school, I went to a Catholic school, and I had a religion every week, and I was the one that was called a disturber. Yes, because I was the questions. I would question things that didn't make sense to me, right? And then I started Spiritism at 9 years old because of this rational way. I was like, okay, that makes sense, and then it goes, right? Any comments or questions here on the internet? Not on the internet. Any comments here or questions?
I think it's good to remember that beyond a scientist and philosopher, he was first an educator.
Yeah.
And everything he brought was kind of Pestalozzi, a great educator, and he followed that path. And we see that in his work as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's what his heart was, right? He was like a primarily this caring, loving educator, right? That you're absolutely right. That took the entire thing to say, now we're going to take all of this to educate like everyone, right? And that's basically the work we're studying.
Yeah, you see the two methodologies. The methodology is an educator, methodology is a scientific person to write the books. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Again. This is great. So I'm going to just say thank you to everyone that was with us over the internet. We're going to say goodbye to you guys as we're going to stay here now.